Our speaker today is Amy Orr-Ewing, and Amy is a great friend of ours. She's married to Frog. They have 3 children. Together now they run a church. But Amy's job, and her background is in theology. She studied at Oxford University. She was at Christ Church, Oxford, where she got a first-class degree in theology. She went on to do a master's, and now she's doing her PhD. And she teaches in Oxford, and she is sought after all over the world for her expertise in theology. She's even been invited to the White House to speak there. She's written 2 books that I really recommend you to not only to read, but maybe give to friends who are asking questions. And the 2 books are this: Why Trust the Bible? Answers to 10 Tough Questions. This is a great book by someone who really knows her stuff about the Bible and about the objections that people raise about the Bible. And then this other one, But Is It Real? Answering 10 common objections to the Christian faith. Again, all the kind of questions that you get asked so often if you have a faith. She has written very succinctly, that this is Amy's gift, is to be able to communicate complex theological issues that she's studied deeply in a very simple way which we can all understand. So she's right here. She's here right now, and I'm thrilled that she's going to be speaking to us. So would you give a very warm welcome to Amy Orr-Ewing?
Thank you, Nicky. Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning. It's wonderful to be with you on this bright morning and to have the opportunity to spend a few moments thinking together about some of the most important questions that we will consider in our lives. At the beginning of John's Gospel, Jesus Christ asks a question. It's a really profound question. It's a question that resonates, I think, really powerfully with us, whatever stage in life we're at, wherever we find ourselves as human beings. And it's fascinating. You probably know that there are 4 Gospels in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in John's Gospel, John chooses to open his Gospel having the first words spoken by Jesus as this question. And that indicates to us something about the nature of the question, how important it is, but also how much both John realizes what we need as human beings and how much Jesus connects with who we are as human beings. And the question is this: what do you want? What do you want? The story is told of a woman walking along a beach. She stumbles on a genie's lamp, obviously a true story. She picks it up, rubs it, the genie appears. The woman says, "Oh, am I going to have 3 wishes?" The genie says, "No, I'm afraid that due to inflation, constant downsizing, low wages in third world countries, and fierce global competition, you can only have 1 wish. So what will it be?" The woman didn't hesitate for a moment. She reached into her handbag and produced a map. She pointed to the Middle East and she said, "I want these countries to stop fighting each other." The genie looked at the map and said, "Listen, lady, these countries have been at war for thousands of years. I'm good, but I'm not that good. It can't be done. Make another wish." The woman thought for a moment. She said, "I've never been able to find quite the right man. One that's considerate and fun, likes to cook and helps with the cleaning, is attractive and gets on with my mother, doesn't watch sports all the time and is faithful. That's what I wish for, the perfect mate." The genie let out a long sigh and said, "Okay, give me the map back." What do you want? What do you want? Jesus asks this question, resonating powerfully, even by raising the question, resonating with the human condition. A question that cuts to the core of who we are, the ache in every human being, our search for purpose, meaning, fulfillment, love. And Jesus knows to put his finger on that and say, what do you want? Now, there are lots of possible answers to that question that are constantly sold to us in our society. Here are some possibilities. What do you want as a human being? You've got this ache inside you. There's a desire for something more. And guess what? The answer is make lots of money, acquire a lot of stuff, be wealthy, own material possessions, have a slightly better house and a nicer kitchen. That will make you happy. Our whole society is geared around this. There's even a science of it. The phrase inbuilt obsolescence, popularized in the 1950s, meant instilling in the buyer the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. But people who study happiness have noticed that affluent countries haven't got happier as they've got richer. Here's what one academic writes. The science of happiness offers two explanations for this paradox. Capitalism is adept at turning luxuries into necessities, bringing to the masses what the elites have always enjoyed. The flip side of this genius is that people come to take for granted the things they once coveted from afar. Frills we thought we could never have are now essentials we cannot do without. We're stuck on a treadmill. As we achieve a better standard of living, we become inured to its pleasures. Want more stuff, acquire more stuff, become more wealthy. Scientists tell us it doesn't actually work. It doesn't answer that question. What do we want? It doesn't make us happier. Well, another option, become famous. Become a celebrity. Enjoy adulation. That will make you happy. My friend and colleague is a woman called Tracy Trinita. She was Indonesia's first supermodel. She worked alongside Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss. I always say, you have to have really, really good self-esteem to stand anywhere near her in a photograph. She modeled for top designers like Yves Saint Laurent, Jean-Paul Gaultier designed specifically for her, Kenzo Benetton. She modeled all over the world, Paris, Milan, New York, London, the major capitals of the world. She described her sense that there must be more to life in this way. She said, I thought if I had more money, I would be happier. So I pursued modeling for happiness. Leaving my friends and family behind, I traveled to New York. Now, despite the glamour and the fame she experienced, she found total emptiness. And this almost increased as she became more famous. She was even in that culturally iconic movie, Zoolander. I wonder here who's seen that. She was a celebrity moving in circles of other celebrities, but she describes this utter, excruciating emptiness. Having everything you'd ever wanted, money, fame, beauty, success, celebrity, parties, and yet this gaping hole inside. In Paris during Fashion Week, a friend invited her to a church service. And at that church service, she describes how, she writes, God bridged the heart and the mind and truly comforted my heart. She wrote, I sensed love like nothing I have ever felt before. She experienced this electrifying, overwhelming, powerful, external, real love meeting her. She said, if Jesus was not real, how could I have felt so amazingly loved? She says, I know and I knew fake happiness. That is what the world of modeling relies on. But this was something real. It was outside of my power. God changed me. What do you want? Well, the world tells us, have material things, become famous, or maybe find love and fulfillment in a relationship with another human being. That's what will make you happy, a loving relationship. Joan Collins famously wrote, my love life is like a piece of Swiss cheese. Most of it is missing, and what's there stinks. What is love was the most searched phrase in Google in 2012. So according to the world's most powerful search engine, humanity is literally searching for love. the desire to be loved. Now, I want to suggest to you this morning that there are two rival narratives about love, fulfillment, meaning, happiness. And they fundamentally disagree with one another. But this morning they compete for our attention. The first narrative will tell you this: in order to find love, present the best side of yourself to the world. Be better with the help of the self-help industry. That way you can be more lovable. Be thin, be rich, be successful. Present yourself well and find the best possible lovers along life's road. Take as much love and sex as you possibly can along the way. Fill your life with what you can get and only settle down when you're older, fatter, and uglier. Love is a consumer sport, a bit like shopping. Find what you like, get hold of it for a while, consume it, and when you're done, move on to a better model. But there's a different narrative, a rival narrative to that one that we're bombarded with in the media. And this different narrative tells us that other routes to love will never ultimately satisfy. In fact, following those pathways will leave us hungrier and wanting more. This second narrative tells us that true love, meaning happiness, are possible, but only rooted in truth. This second narrative tells us that truth is vitally important. I want to explore it in two ways: the truth about God and the truth about me. Jesus said that the truth will set you free. Coming to know the truth will set you free. Now, of course, the irony is that many people think faith is a delusion. It's wish fulfillment that just cushions us from the harsh realities of life. And it might make some people happy who have that particular bent, but it's not for everyone, and it's certainly not true. But Jesus promises that the truth will set us free, and that it's only through discovering truth and meeting truth that we will ultimately be able to answer that first question Jesus asked: what do you want? It's only through meeting the truth that we'll find satisfaction for that ache. So the truth about him, the truth about me. Let's begin with the truth about him, the truth about God. Now, my grandfather was an atomic scientist. He passionately believed that there was no God. He escaped from East Germany in a small plane sent by the British because of the nature of his work. He forbade his family from reading the Bible or talking about God. He thought religion is psychology or it's culture. There's no substance to it. It's just wish fulfillment, and we shouldn't believe in it. My own father pursued a career in academia, and it was in his 30s that he became persuaded of the truth and reality of God, despite every predisposition not to believe in God. The truth about God transcends our personal preference. It transcends our family background. And I want to suggest to you three things about the truth about him. The first thing is that he came in history, that God in Christ came in history. As part of my work in Oxford, I had the privilege a little while ago of taking a group of students to Magdalen College Documents Library. I can sense some of you have a geekometer, and it's going off right now. It was an absolutely thrilling journey to Magdalen College. We were going to view 3 fragments of Matthew's Gospel, which have recently begun to cause something of a stir. They're dated by most scholars around about 150 AD. They were bought by a don of the college who'd been on holiday in Egypt in the early 1900s. He was in Luxor, he was in a market, noticed some interesting looking manuscripts, bought them, and they've been in the library ever since. From 150 AD, pieces of Matthew's Gospel, that shows us that Matthew's Gospel must have been completed in the 1st century, in the time of Jesus himself and the lifetime of Matthew the disciple. In other words, the gospel could not have been made up later by people with an agenda, layering mythology over the top of history. The miraculous and divine claims about Jesus are there in the earliest sources. Now, if Jesus was a legend, if Jesus didn't exist and the stories about him are legendary, we would need time in order for that legend to develop. And the study of legendary accumulation, would you believe, is something that academics actually do. We might take the example of someone like Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, his earliest biographies were written more than 400 years after his death. And they're trusted as historical, as reliable. It's only after that time that the more legendary stories about Alexander begin to develop. In other words, legends take hundreds of years to accumulate. Now, many people believe the Gospels are religious, mythical, fictional in intention. They're not. They're not written as such. They're written as history. And detailed archaeological studies show us that the Gospel writers were good historians. And these early fragments show us that we can trust this as history. The truth about him is that he actually came in history. He really existed. Well, I hear you say, just because he existed, why is it rational to go along with the idea of that he's God and that he can change people, like these wonderful stories we've been hearing from Alpha? Well, his miracles, and in particular his resurrection, show us that. But is it rational to believe in a miraculous resurrection? Well, I love what C.S. Lewis writes about miracles. You may have heard of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Well, the guy who wrote that also wrote about other things. He said this: if on each of 2 nights I put £10 into my bedside drawer, the laws of arithmetic tell me that I now have a total of £20. If, however, on waking up I find only £5 in my drawer, I don't conclude that the laws of arithmetic have been broken, but possibly the laws of England. In other words, the laws of nature describe for us the regularities on which the universe runs. But God is not a prisoner of the laws of nature, no more than a thief is the prisoner of the laws of arithmetic. Like my bedroom, the universe is not a closed system. God can, if he wills, do something special, do a miracle like raising Jesus from the dead. Now, what's fascinating here is that it is my knowledge of the laws of arithmetic that warns me that I've been robbed. And in the same way, it's our knowledge of the laws of nature that allow us to recognize a miracle, to see that this is miraculous. Do you know, when you do investigate miraculous claims connected to Jesus, and particularly his resurrection from the dead, you might be surprised by what you discover. Professor Richard Swinburne, one of the cleverest people in Britain today, professor of philosophy at the University of Oxford for years, very, very highly regarded. He comes in and teaches our students regularly. He wrote a book investigating the resurrection of Jesus using Bayes' theorem. And he concluded, on the basis of his research, that it is 97% probable that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. 97%. And then he's taken that work and defended it all over the world at conferences and written it up into a book to be scrutinized. 97% probable. I suggest to you that is worthy of our attention and investigation. The truth about him is testable. He came in history. He did miracles to show us that he was really God. And we can test those claims. Into the reality of human history and the reality of the ache of the human heart, Jesus Christ speaks. You see, Christianity is not primarily an intellectual position. Although it is rooted in truth and reality, it is substantial and stands up to rigor and scrutiny. Actually, what Jesus is doing is claiming that it's possible to come to know God and experience him, not just to know about him and to trust what we know about him. He promises that coming to know him actually changes us. Now, one of Britain's leading atheists, a man called Matthew Paris, often writes for The Times and The Spectator, a little while ago wrote a piece in The Times reflecting on his childhood in Africa. It was a longer piece, but in the course of this article, he wrote about what he saw as the impact of Christianity. And I just want to share this with you, because I want to suggest that Jesus' claims to actually change us are as testable as his claim to have risen from the dead and to have come in history. Matthew Paris writes this: "Now a confirmed atheist, I've become convinced of the enormous contribution that Christian evangelism makes in Africa, sharply distinct from the work of secular NGOs, government projects and international aid efforts. These alone will not do. Education and training alone will not do. In Africa, Christianity changes people's hearts. It brings a spiritual transformation. The rebirth is real. The change is good." He writes, "I used to avoid this truth by applauding as you can the practical work of mission churches in Africa. It's a pity, I would say, that salvation is a part of the package, but Christians, black and white, working in Africa, do heal the sick, do teach people to read and write, and only the severest kind of secularist could see a mission hospital or school and say the world would be better without it. I would allow, if faith was needed to motivate missionaries to help, then fine, but what counted was the help, not the faith. But this doesn't fit the facts," he writes. "In Africa, Christianity changes people's hearts. It brings a spiritual transformation. The rebirth is real. The change is good." The truth about him is testable. We can test, we can push into this and discover whether this is true or not. And the truth about him is all very nice. He came in history, he did miracles, and he claims to substantially meet people and give us new life. But does that truth about him actually connect with me? Or is that for other people, for religious people, for people who are better at church and philosophy or just more generally associated with Christianity? In some ways, the truth about him is useless if it's not powerful enough to connect with the truth about me. And the truth about me, as Jesus recognizes in raising that question we started with, what do you want? The truth about me is that I'm anxious and I need a deliverer. Wealth, sex, fame, power cannot deal with my fear. Studies show us that most people's anxiety is focused and preoccupied with 40% of things that will never happen, 30% on things relating to the past that can't be changed, 12% relating to other people's criticism, which is generally untrue, 10% related to health, which often gets worse with stress and negative thinking. Only 8% of time do we worry about real concerns that immediately need to be faced. The story is told of a woman who couldn't sleep at night. She was worried the house would be burgled. One night, her husband heard the noise in the house. She gave him the old dig in the ribs. He went down to investigate. When he got there, he found a burglar. He immediately said, "Come upstairs and meet my wife. She's been waiting 10 years to meet you." A burglar can steal from us, but worry, anxiety is also a thief with whom many of us are well acquainted. Jesus Christ looks fear in the face. In John 14, verse 27, he says, "My peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Trust in me." The truth about him connects with the truth about me. He understands the human condition. He knows the question to ask that connects with that emptiness and that ache. What do you want? And he speaks directly to who we are. He speaks to our fear, and he claims to be able to deliver us from fear. The truth about him is that he came in history, that he actually existed, that he rose from the dead, and that he can and does change people's lives. The truth about me is that I'm fearful and anxious, that I need a deliverer. The other truth about me is that I'm broken. I mess up. One of the joys of my job, I speak a lot in universities, both here and around the world, and get to meet university students and talk through questions about life and faith and all kinds of things. But one of the things that I have observed is the massive transition that has taken place in the last 20 years since I was at university, the pressure on people to present ourselves, to be constantly on top of your own personal image management. I was talking recently with with people about dating, and I met my husband in the era before Facebook, actually before really email took off. That is how old I am. And what I discovered, what I hear is you have to be constantly on top of the angle that the photograph of you that might appear on a social networking site has been taken at. And if it's the wrong angle, you immediately need to get on there with Photoshop and change it. You cannot have a bad angle of yourself out there. Why not? Because we want to be loved, we want to be liked, we want to meet people who are going to find us acceptable and pleasing. And so we need to be on top of making sure that no one sees the bad side of us, but that we present the very best of ourselves in the hope of finding happiness and relationship. The amazing truth about him is that he connects with the truth about me, that I'm broken. And he doesn't say, Amy, put your church face on. Present the most religiously pleasing view of yourself to me. Jump over these moral hurdles in order to come to know me. No, the truth about him is that he comes to meet me in the truth about me, and that's that I'm broken, that there are things in my life that are regrettable, unlovable. He loves me, he loves you without condition. The truth about me is that I need to be understood and loved in my brokenness, and that means that I need forgiveness. The brilliant Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn became a Christian after Stalin put him in a prison camp in the Gulag for writing poetry, and Solzhenitsyn met other Christians in that camp. And he wrote a brilliant book called The Gulag Archipelago, but in that book, he writes this about the human condition. He says, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them off from the rest of us and destroy them. But, he says, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties, but through every human heart and all human hearts. Our brokenness and our need for forgiveness is a truth about us that Jesus acknowledges as he shows us that he loves us. How does he do it? How does he love me in my brokenness and my anxiety? Well, ultimately, he does this through the cross. Now, the cross is a very familiar image to people inside and outside of the church. We see it everywhere. Necklaces, buildings, we're familiar with it, and we probably have a fairly hazy view that, Jesus was executed by the Romans on a cross. And so perhaps we don't really think about it. Well, a cartoon has been found on the walls of ancient Rome that give us an insight into just how radical and extraordinary it is to meet God on a cross. You see, the Greco-Roman world, they worshipped their gods and goddesses, but they knew that their gods and goddesses demanded things of them: standards, offerings, money. And they were powerful. They believed they were powerful, and they wanted to appease them. There was no love, no relationship, and certainly never self-emptying or sacrifice. So this cartoon on the walls of ancient Rome depicts a body of a man on a Roman cross, but it's a grotesque image. The man has the head of a donkey. And underneath this horrible image is a young man kneeling down with his hand raised in worship to this grotesque thing. And the inscription is satirical underneath. It reads, "He worships his God." It utterly defied understandable categories to hear of a God who would enter human history not as a powerful emperor on a chariot dominating, a God who would enter human history and suffer for his people. Meet people as we are in brokenness and sorrow and regret, and through that death offer us forgiveness and new life. Gandhi wrote this. He said, "The cross of Christ is the most overwhelming aspect of the Christian faith. It is singularly unique. Nowhere else do you meet a God who suffers with us or for us." And this is meeting us in the truth about us, but it is substantially rooted in truth. This is not wish fulfillment. This is established in history and reality so that we can know, that we can trust the offer of love and forgiveness. I have 3 children, and they're all mad about tennis. They're all quite good little tennis players. I've got twins who are 9 and another little guy who's 6. They're all boys. And one of the joys of them loving tennis is that I get to watch them play and win, which is thrilling. One of the hardships of it is I have to drive them around the country to various tournaments. And a little while ago, my youngest one gets rather unwell in the car, and he'd played his heart out in this tournament, and I was driving the 3 boys, and they were all really grumpy. I'm sure that never happens in your family. We were driving along, and we needed to stop and get some food, so we stopped at the service station, and they had what they needed, and I'd gone up to pay, and I heard behind me a shout. And the twins, I looked back, and they were walking backwards shouting, "He's gonna blow!" And I looked at the little one, and he was green in the face, and his lip was hovering. And I found myself, without thinking, sprinting to him, gathering him into my arms as he erupted in vomit all over me, into my hair, on the floor. A small crowd gathered. They were clapping. The twins were shouting, "It's disgusting. It's awful. We're never going in the car with that." We're not a dramatic family at all. As we got cleaned up and got into the car, we drove off. I thought, why on earth did I do that? I've got to drive home now. Why? And I thought, I want to be the kind of mother who loves my children when they're succeeding. And I'm cheering them on, and I'm so proud of them. And I'm seeing them fulfill the potential that they have, and I'm seeing the joy on their face as they do what they were made to do. Flourishing. But I also want them to know that I love them when they're failing, when they're alone, when they're unwell, when they're broken, when they need a deliverer, when they need a rescuer. Nowhere else do we meet a God who substantially reveals himself as truth, but whose truth connects with the truth about us. Nowhere else do we encounter a God who loves us in our brokenness and who offers us forgiveness that is real and therefore relationship and transformation that even Britain's leading atheist concludes the rebirth is real. I want to just leave you with one thought and we're going to have a prayer. And the thought is this. In the book of Acts, Paul says that God longs for, he's in Athens talking to highly intellectual people, and he says God longs for people to reach out to him. He is not far from any one of us. I wonder if you know that today. He's removed intellectual barriers for every one of us to know him. He's removed the distance between us and him caused by our brokenness, things that we've done, things that have been done to us. He is not far from any one of us, and all we need to do is reach out to him. He's done everything to make it possible. So we're going to close our eyes now for a moment, and I want to give you the opportunity to pray. And it may be that you would like to reach out to God and know the God who is not far from any one of us. I'm going to say a simple prayer along the lines of sorry, thank you, and please, recognizing our own brokenness, thanking Jesus for what he's done and asking him in. And it may be that you've never done this before, or that you have, but it was a very long time ago and you've drifted away and you want to know God close again today. So I'm going to pray, and then if you could just echo in your hearts, if you'd like to do that, that would be great. Dear Jesus, I'm sorry for the brokenness in my life, things that I've done, ways that I've hurt others, things that I regret. Thank you, Jesus, for coming for me. Thank you that you died on the cross and that you met and you meet me in my brokenness. Please forgive me. Please come into my life now by the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen.